We got about one more minute here before we officially hit the time. Do we have a quorum?
It looks like you have Daisy, Judy, Rosemary, and yourself. So I believe that is 4 and a quorum.
Yeah, that's, we got that. Has anybody heard from Casey at all? Well, I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting, given that we're right on time and we do have a quorum. So I will begin the meeting of the Oak Harbor Parks Board, and we have, as was stated, a quorum. Do I have a, jumping into the minutes, do I have here a motion to approve the minutes of March 8th?
I so moved to approve the minutes of March 8th and March 17, 2021 meetings.
Yeah, I don't know if we have to do those separate, so I'll do the 8th first. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and second to adopt the minutes as written for March. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those against? It is passed. And now I'll entertain a motion for approval of the workshop for the special meeting of March 17th. Daisy, you want to do that?
Sure, I moved to approve the March 17, 2021 special meeting.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Since I wasn't there, I really can't say.
Right.
Okay.
Rosemary did second.
Rosemary, thank you. And so it's been moved and second for the approval of the minutes. All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. All those against? It's been passed and we approve those minutes. Now I'm open for public comments. Anybody have any comments that they wish to do? I see a hand up. Can't see quite who it is.
Hal Hovey.
Ah,
Hi, I'm Hal Hovey. I'm a resident of Oak Harbor. I've got 2 comments. One is I've seen that, and I apologize for not being at the meetings for the last quite a while, but I see that there's been a lot of work on doing the project for the Harbor Heights Park. And I'm just wondering, the council had originally committed to following up on the next phase of the Windjammer Park. It seems to be that that is kind of gone by the wayside in favor of Harbor Heights. And the second thing that I'd like to make a comment on is Windjammer Park, even the first phase is not done yet. There's still a walkway over on the west side of the park that has a couple little stairs in it, little steps in it, and still blocked off on both ends. And I'm wondering if that's ever going to open up. It connects to the trail that goes up the hill. Thank you.
and I see a hand with, I'll just acknowledge you and go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's Laura Reniger. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I just want to comment about something that was brought up at a previous Parks Board meeting about the dead trees in Windjammer Park that someone had noticed. And so with the help of Tally and the prior approval of Jesse Ott, the Oak Harbor Gary Oak Society removed the dead trees, which were primarily madrona with a couple of shore pines that had died. And so we replaced 6 trees along the waterfront with Gary oaks and 1 along near the east entrance to the park with a Gary oak tree. And we used the biggest ones we had, which are still pretty small, but at least they look like a sapling and not just a little stick in the ground. And so we'll continue to monitor the health of those trees. And I just want to let you know that. And one other brief thing, and that is you on the Parks Board should have received a pin by now helping to celebrate the Year of the Oak, which is the celebration of the 170th year of naming our town for the Gary Oak tree. We're calling it the Year of the Oak. So check with Julie, Lindsay, or maybe Sabrina, even if you haven't received your pin yet. Okay, thanks.
I appreciate that. I haven't heard. Can I ask, just for curiosity, because it's been pronounced both ways, is it Jerry Oak or Gary Oak?
Gary, like a man's name, Gary.
Gary is a man's name too. So.
Yeah.
Okay, with the G being pronounced more, not a J. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have any other comments other than me? I'd like to go back to Hal's question about the stairs that are blocked off. We did discuss that at one point, that they were there set for the plan to go, but there was an issue of getting across and a crosswalk and everything to go across to meet the other pathway. Where are we on that? Who can speak to that?
I can speak a little bit to it for you. The road is not up to the standard. There's no sidewalks. There's nothing on it. So the road really needs improved before that really opens it up. Otherwise, we're just opening it up people to walk right into traffic there. So it needs crosswalks. It needs sidewalk areas or a proper area for at least people to walk, gravel path, whatever you'd like to do there. But that is in phase 2, I believe, is when that opens up, because they have to do the whole road at that point in time through there, which is another project.
Daisy, you have your hand up, or?
No, I'm just fixing my stuff here. Sorry, I'm not raising my hand.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't understand that it was phase 2. I did know that we had to have a proper beginning and end on that stairs. And my question is that, is there any preparation that the parks needs to do, in especially on the other side where the gravel path that goes up past the wetland area there? Does that need to be prepared in any way?
It's really kind of out of our realm of things right now, because we don't have any guidance via engineering what they want to have done there. The steps, the 2 steps in the middle of it, technically they're not ADA compliant, so that might be an issue too. I'm assuming whatever we do there will have to be ADA compliant, you know. So there's some stuff to be ironed out and figured out exactly what they're going to do there before we can move ahead really on it.
And who speaks to that who can bring that to the board in further discussion?
I can make a note of it and talk to Alex in engineering, see if he knows anything, but it's just a one-man guy over there in engineering right now, so things are kind of moving slow.
Yeah,
I can pick it up to him.
Like I agree with Hal that we need an update. If there's stuff that the park needs to deal with, like for instance, making the ADA those steps, we talked about that way in the beginning, about that there needs to be a ramp of some sort, maybe on one side of the railing or something. But that was, I just want to make sure that as far as anything that we need to talk about, the road is more, when the city gets to working on it, but the parts on the park we should talk about when it's necessary.
I think the main reason they don't open it up right now is because of the safety standard of someone walking down that path. They pretty much walk right out into the road, Right. So there's no protection for pedestrians there.
Yeah, I understand that. I just want to make sure that when when the road gets paved and a curb gets put in, that the park is ready to go, or if there's anything that can be done sooner than, last minute. All I would say.
Sure.
Hal, does that answer your question or comment?
Yeah, it does, but it it goes back to what you just said a second ago, where the ramp issue came up at the very, 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 very beginning, and it's kind of crazy that that's just now going to be addressed again, and I'm surprised that it's all waiting for phase 2. But yeah, it answers my question. Thank you.
Maybe I can elaborate a little more for you on that. There's other pieces of the puzzle, like the stormwater and that sort of thing. When they do the curb and all that and the sidewalks, that's all integrated piece, and that's kind of where they can't mesh it together quite yet. That's where they're having their issues. So there's new stormwater that will have to go in, and I believe they're doing something with the sewer line. I'm not sure, but there's quite a bit of work to be done on that road when it happens, and that's going to change the geometry of the situation down there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also have some comments as usual. I want to compliment the park staff on being really on top of things in the parks that I have visited. I haven't seen them all this spring, but the ones that I have are really doing well. I mean, the Windjammer and of course is where I live, so I see that every day, and they're just really on top of stuff. They're doing tremendous work, so compliments to your staff. I do appreciate the permanent garbage can by the dock at Windjammer and by the lagoon there, rather than a temporary one that gets blown over every time it gets windy. So thanks for going on that. And the same thing goes for the dog bag dispensers, that you replaced the one that was right there by the main plaza, and put up the old style, which actually works better, I think. But I appreciate that, because, and keeping on top of the bags being in the dispensers, so that with this increased amount of dogs that we've gotten with the COVID times, it really gets used up fast. I also want to go back to the trees. That I do appreciate the Gary Oak Society's volunteers that were out there putting those in, and they did it really, really good job. They barked around the base. They put the stakes in. I have to compliment them on the speed in which they did that. I mean, they got in and did it. And, they even improved the area around the oak that's right by the plaza, the old one, the big one. And it looks really nice. I know that there's going to be a sign, I believe, up. Maybe that's in the update. But I also want to comment to the staff there that they got on it right away when I mentioned it to some staff in the park one day. But the fence around the Asian garden or Japanese garden area, that little garden by the Teachers Memorial, that fence is about ready to fall down again. I checked it this morning, and they had secured it a little bit, but what it is I think is the posts have rotted out. And I don't know if the group that put that, maintained that at one point, if they're still doing that, or if it's going to end up being the park's issue to replace the post. But being that it is as precarious as it is, as I mentioned to the staff when I talked to them before, was that, we got sued or attempted to be sued for a lady who said that, some driftwood that some people had piled out on the beach fell on her dog, and she was upset that it was our responsibility, which it wasn't. But if it's that easy, this fence falls on some kid or dog or a person's leg or whatever, we could be in some trouble. So I think it needs to be handled fairly quickly. And I hope that that whoever's responsible for it, whether it's this group that put in the garden or if it's us, we should have the posts fixed. So that's one. And then the other piece that I wanted to mention was that we are getting in the time where contacts need to be made to the dive group or that volunteer diver that cleaned out the lagoon area or made sure that it was safe for swimmers. I caught 2 people going into the water as cold as it was when it was sunny one day, and it was like, whoa, you're really brave that it's that cold. But nonetheless, it's that whole idea of we have to have that checked, and that isn't their usual routine for staff, but I didn't want to get it lost because of the safety issues. And let's see, I think that's about it. Other than I do appreciate, again, the staff's work on doing stuff, doing such a good job. Is there anybody else that has any other comments to the public, from the public? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is we'll go right into new business and the Gary Oak presentation.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to talk about the history of the Gary Oak in Oak Harbor. And thank you all for joining me today. In case you don't know me, I am the president of the Oak Harbor Gary Oak Society. My name is Laura Renninger. So in talking about the history, we're going to talk about when is a tree more than just a tree. And I say that when it's our heritage, and it is our heritage. So we're going to examine how our community history, how the people that have lived here are intertwined with our oak trees. So we do know from historical documents that there used to be acres and acres of oaks here along the bay. And the indigenous people cared for the Gary Oak ecosystems. They used oaks, they used the food of the acorn as food. They used the tree medicinally, perhaps spiritually. And the native language, they called the Gary Oak the adze plant. And the adze is a tool like an axe. It's an ancient tool. It's extremely useful in those cultures, utilitarian tool. And so that was their name for it. And the site was not called Oak Harbor. It was a lower Skagit tribe that lived here, and they called this place Clatalechsee. And it wasn't until 1851, after the donation land claim gentlemen had arrived, that their colleague, Dr. Richard Lansdale, coined the term Oak Harbor, and that's the name that stuck. We know from the donation land claim documents of Martin Tafson that's recorded at Island County that his land claim contained 170 acres of prairie and oak openings, and the soil was first rate. And also from the book published in 1911 called Island County, A World Beater, there's an excerpt: scattered over the town site are beautiful oak groves, affording refreshing shade and pleasing to the eye. Now this picture, I just want to start off by saying I realize that it's extremely disrespectful to, potentially disrespectful to any tribal people, but I think it's historically relevant, and that's why I'm sharing it. And so we know that on some occasions for a special or important tribal person, that they were buried in a large tree with their possessions in a canoe or a wooden box. And so this is a a photograph credited by Ernest Hancock. The Hancock family still lives on the prairie in Coopville, so an old pioneer family. And all we know about it is it's an example of a native burial canoe in an old Gary oak tree. So can you see my cursor here? Okay, so this object here in the tree is the burial canoe. And you can see that it's resting, oops, it's resting on the limbs of a massive Gary oak tree. And also we have the historical document provided by Dr. George Kellogg that states that the dead were wrapped in mats and placed in a canoe and placed high in the tree, a tree. So in talking about the pioneer families and how they used Gary oaks to honor their dead, there was a tragedy in 1864 where 3 members of the same family all died when they drowned when their canoe went upside down in a storm, a sudden storm that came up. And that was Grace and David McCrowan. And Grace was the mother of Christina Barrington. Christina and Ed Barrington are considered the founding family of Oak Harbor. So the community was totally devastated. And this picture here is a bronze plaque that's attached to one of the tombstones in the Pioneer Cemetery. And the story goes that prior to her death, Grace was out walking with her daughter and said, boy, that's a beautiful oak tree there. You know, someday when I die, I'd like to be buried under that tree. And little did anyone know that it would be very soon that she was actually buried under the tree. So this is a private cemetery in Oak Harbor next to the Catholic Church. And right here where the cross is where Grace is buried, and you can see her tree. And then her son-in-law, Maurice O'Leary, is buried here. Now, Martin Tasson has an interesting story. Again, he was one of the 3 donation land claim men who came to Oak Harbor. And he was Norwegian, and shortly after he arrived, he took a Native American wife, and they had 2 little boys. And one day he was getting ready to go to Olympia by canoe to get supplies, because of course the roads were unheard of at that time. And so water was the method of transport. He told his wife, if the boys become ill, please don't take them to the village healer, take them to Dr. So-and-so. Well, he left and the boys came down with the measles, and they were very ill and they later died. And when Martin returned, he was grief-stricken and flew into a rage and unfortunately kicked his poor wife out and took the boys and decided to bury them underneath an oak tree. Now, we don't know which oak tree, but we do know roughly where his little cabin shelter was, which is somewhere on Southeast 9th Avenue. And right now there's, sorry, I keep doing that. There's the Sea-Watch condos, which are built apparently right where his dwelling was. And you can see they carved as a tribute to him at the bottom. This was apparently a Gary oak tree at one time. They carved this sort of lighthouse looking thing. And then at the bottom, they carved a little cabin. So anywhere, somewhere in that vicinity is where he buried the boys under a Gary oak on the hillside above his cabin. And also there's some beautiful Gary oaks across the street next to the Calvary Chapel, which are very old. But in general, the pioneers and those that came after in the community did not really value the oaks as a nut orchard or for any other purpose other than an expendable environmental resource. And so it was all about the timber. In the 1850s to 1860s, there were 5 oak schooners built at Utsalati. We're going to talk about Utsalati in upcoming. That's on Camano Island and Oak Harbor. Dorothy Neal, the late historian, said that logging was a way of life on Whidbey Island and a matter of survival for many a family man. So they cut down most of the trees. Now, we don't have the remaining massive acres of oaks left here in Oak Harbor, and we don't have the old wooden structures from that century either, like, for example, Coopville does. We do have this beautiful house, which is adjacent to Smith Park, and it was built by Lawrence Byrne. He was a businessman. He was an Irishman. He had many businesses along Southeast Pioneer Way that later burnt down in the famous 1920s fire in Oak Harbor, but his house survived. And so that's what we have left of him. But I want to say that we still have a number of beautiful old oaks, and they are our best antiques. I'm going to skip this one for the sake of time. This is a pioneer family picnicking sort of under some Gary oaks in the early spring. Now this brings us to Utsalati. So prior to the Deception Pass Bridge being built, there was a passenger ferry from Oak Harbor to the north, let's see, would it be the northeast tip of Camino? And it's called Utsalati, and there was a lumber mill there, and there's quite a thriving community. And so this passenger ferry started running about 1915, and it ran until the Deception Pass Bridge opened in 1935. And look what it was called. It was called the Acorn. I don't know if you can see that right there, the Acorn. So it was very important in getting passengers off the island. The little Acorn. All right, I think I'm going to skip this one. This is just a historic photo of the first, the Methodist Church, which burned down. Another one was built in its place, but you can see a Gary oak nestled next to it. This is also a historic photo. This is now the Whidbey Playhouse as we know it, but it was called the Christian Reformed Church in Oak Harbor. And next to it stands a beautiful white parsonage. That structure is tucked behind the playhouse now. It's used as a rental house. And next to it is the beautiful Gary oak that still stands to this day. And that's also noted in this photograph. It's titled Giant Native Oak Tree, Oak Harbor, Washington. And this tree is definitely a significant landscape tree. It's in, let's see, 2003, it was estimated that it has a height of 55 feet and a crown spread of 62 feet and an estimated age of 220 years or more. This is an excerpt from the Oak Harbor High School yearbook. So in case you don't know, the yearbook in Oak Harbor has been called the Acorn since they first began keeping a yearbook. And this is the 1958 edition on the cover page or shortly into the book. And there's a beautiful poem I'm not going to take the time to read, but somebody hand drew this picture of a Gary oak tree in the winter against the setting sun. And it talks about oaks against the sky. Definitely was treasured by the class of 1958. So I wanted to talk a little bit about local families growing up in the middle of the last century here in Oak Harbor. And because it's handy, I have a picture of my family. So I would consider my family to have been an average Oak Harbor family. So this was the Shepherd family, and my grandfather was a CPA, and he worked for a bank in Oak Harbor, Everett Trust and Savings, which was the precursor to Interwest Bank and Wells Fargo and all that. And my grandmother, looking very serene, sitting there, was a teacher in Oak Harbor schools. And then there's my dad and his two brothers. My dad's the one with the glasses and the bow tie, trying to look really dapper. But they grew up on Southeast 8th Street, back when it was called 400 Avenue East. And they had acorn fights with other kids. They built a tree house, a big tree house in the Oak, not in the very center of the street, but kind of off to the side of the street, where they entertained themselves for hours. Another local family remembers swinging in a hammock between two sturdy oaks in the 1960s, or growing seedlings to give away as just sort of a tradition. Myself, I was born in 1963, and I spent a lot of time in Grandma's house. And so I have memories of playing and jumping in big piles of oak leaves in the autumn. And my grandma would pay my sister and I a penny per acorn to pick up in her lawn. And then we would take the money and we would trot on down to Maston's Variety Store, which was the store to buy candy at, down there on Pioneer Way. And those are just some traditions that I wanted to share from a family that still lives here. Now we're going to talk about Everdinia Douglas and the Douglas family. So the Douglas family came to Oak Harbor in the 1860s. William Bill Douglas was a butcher. He was friends with Mr. Byrne, who had the business district. Everdina lived in a beautiful little bungalow on Midway Boulevard, and her family is very significant when we talk about what happened when the trees were starting to be cut down in the 80s and 90s. So remember, Everdina Douglas, and this picture, let's see, she is actually standing on the corner where the Presbyterian church is now, because you can see in the background the parsonage of the Christian Reformed Church. Okay, so then what happened in the 80s and 90s, there was a housing shortage, and the oaks were being cut down right and left to make way for condos or whatnot. So things really reached the boiling point in the summer of 1990, when after the destruction of so many of these very large oaks, people had enough. And Everdina Douglas had sold her property on Midway, and a developer came in and cut down like 2 or 3 of them all in one day, just cut them all down. And it was Everdina's descendant, Mike Douglas, who was the first one up to the podium in City Hall when the citizens packed the building that summer night and said, okay, we have to do something. And actually, there was a resolution adopted by the City Council in the 80s to discourage people from cutting down the oaks. But of course, there was no teeth to it, and it just kept happening. So Mike Douglas stood up and said that he was shocked at the destruction of the property and the old oak trees, and he urged the council to proclaim these trees as historic. Old timers such as Dorothy Neal and members of the Oak Harbor Garden Club, who were well respected in the community, and former council members spoke up. And Mike had asked the Island County Historical Society for help, and so they had proposed a draft of a Gary Oak Tree Protection Code. And that's how our first Gary Oak Tree Protection Code began. So that was a turning point in starting to conserve the oak trees that were left. And I like this photograph. This is another historic photograph. It says Native Oak Trees, Oak Harbor, Washington. It's somewhere in Southeast Oak Harbor. I walked around, I couldn't really pinpoint the spot. Obviously those trees are gone now too, but you can kind of see through the trees, the wharf, which was the Mailer's Wharf, which later burned down. You can see that. And also from my screen, I don't know how well you can look at or how clear your screen is, but you can see in the field, it looks like little white fluff balls or little white particles. And that's actually a field of native fawn lily flowers that were blooming at the time. And so you can definitely see the correlation between the native understory or some of the native flowers and the trees. So now I want to talk about Jerome Ely. And for those of you who don't know Jerome Ely, he was Oak Harbor's very first mayor. And he fought it with Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania 57th Infantry in the Civil War. He was injured by a musket ball. And when he was recuperating, he decided he was going to leave the Midwest and come west and start a new life. He was still relatively young. So he came west to Whidbey Island in 1873 after he recovered from his wounds. And he ended up purchasing some land in the heart of Oak Harbor. And this is on Southeast Fidalgo Street. So I want to just point out on the screen, these 2 beautiful trees still stand. And it looks like one big ginormous tree, but it's actually 2 rare side-by-side form oaks. And the reason why I say rare is because there's 3 trunks to each tree, and only a small percentage of Oak Harbor's Gary Oak trees have 3 trunks. Most of them are single trunked or dual trunked, so to have 2 side-by-side 3 trunk trees is relatively unusual. And the site of his homestead, he chose to leave those trees standing, and this was essentially the entrance to his front steps. And so a little bit more about Jerome Ely. He was also the first postmaster of Oak Harbor. He was very active in the community. And I like to think that these trees are the heritage oaks of Jerome Ely. They're not necessarily protected from severe pruning, but I hope that they will stand someday when that site is developed. They were threatened in 2007, 2008. Someone was going to build some kind of like mini shopping mall or condos or something. And they were proposing to really cut back those trees. I mean, heavily prune them, and they probably wouldn't have survived. But at that time, if you recall, 2007, 2008, the economy dumped and the funding dried up, and then nothing really happened. I would also like to point out on the left side of the screen, this is a photo of a Gary Oak tree on the Ely property and behind the sheep. This tree is no longer standing, but this little house is, and that is the Help House, which is still standing today and an essential part of Oak Harbor in the community and feeding the hungry people. And Jerome's son, Vernon, donated that house to the city of Oak Harbor. So again, he continued to give, his family continued to give to the community. So we can't have a discussion about the Gary Oaks in Oak Harbor without talking about the grand old oak and the post office tree. You know, it's been 7 years. This is still a really, when I have conversations with people in the community, this is still a hot topic. So this tree, according to the ring count, was 330 years old when it was cut down. So that means it started growing in 1684. And there was a family called the Keister family. They were Dutch, and they settled on the spot. It was called Keister Marsh. And it was quite marshy down there on that area of Oak Harbor at the time. Herman Keister, the gentleman farmer, proudly measured the oak tree every year. It was a big deal in their family. They measured it. They talked about it. It was estimated to be like the 3rd largest in the state. And eventually the Keister family sold the property and it became the post office site. And then the roots system was paved over. You know, some of that black like plastic was laid down around, you know, the tree wasn't as healthy as it had been. And then some large limbs proceeded to start falling. 2, I believe, fell. And of course it was deemed a hazard to the public. So the mayor at the time, Scott Dudley, elected to have the tree cut down. I think the rubbing point with the public was they didn't know it was going to suddenly be cut down. And it was cut down early on a Sunday morning. The process was started early on a Sunday morning in March. So now we're at the 7-year anniversary, and I'm really excited to think that the City of Oak Harbor, the Arts Commission, Parks, Public Works is all getting ready later this week, to have the artist Pat McVeigh cut into the large section that remains of the base of the tree and see what kind of art artist Pat McVeigh can make out of this, something that the public can enjoy in a way to honor the oak tree. Dorothy Neal, so I just want to touch on Dorothy Neal, and let's see, what time is it? 12. Am I doing okay for time? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay, thanks. So Dorothy Neal, Dorothy was an integral part of the Oak Harbor community, and Dorothy Neal was definitely an ambassador of the oak trees. And she had many talents. She was a mother with deep faith. She served on the Parks Board. She served on the school board. She served on city council. She played in the community band. She was a poet and a writer and a photojournalist and columnist for Whidbey News Times. So in the middle of this collage is a photo of Dorothy Neal, and what do you think she's resting her hand on? A Gary Oak tree. So she wrote this famous poem, I think it was called Oak Tree Ambassador or something, about the Gary Oak tree in the middle of Southeast 8th Street that she heard that was going to be cut down because somebody in the streets department decided it was a hazard. And so I'm not going to read the poem to you, but the poem has become sort of epically famous in Oak Harbor because Dorothy claims to have saved that tree. She was of Irish descent, but she also celebrated Holland Happening. And so every year back in the day, there used to be, someone would make a plaque like this tile on the left side of the screen. Every year it was different, and they would sell it to raise funds for the Holland Happening event. And so in 1991, Dorothy was chosen to do the artwork. And so of course she did a great big ginormous Gary Oak tree in the center with some tulips at the bottom, Holland Happening, Oak Harbor, and then acorns and oak leaves. Also, she put in the historic Neal Tower, which the Historic Preservation is making preparations for, hopefully getting it on the historic register. And then the roller barn too. So then in 2015, the Oak Harbor Gary Oak Society was born. Also in November of 2015, some of the employees at the City of Oak Harbor, like Arnie Peter Schmidt, Brad Gluth, Tie House, Rich Tie House, I think. Some of those gentlemen presented the idea to the city to take this fallow land north of Oak Harbor. It was called the Boyer property. It was just kind of sitting there. Nobody was doing anything with it, but the city owned it. Also, to complicate things, it's a designated crash zone for the military, so it couldn't ever really be a park. And the idea was put forward of, hey, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the incorporation of the City of Oak Harbor. Let's do something meaningful with that land. Let's see if we can get 100 Gary Oak saplings and let's plant them, and we'll call it Centennial Grove. So that's how that idea evolved. There was help from the community and Public Works planting. We had a couple of planting days, and then later, Garden Club, Gary Oak Society, and others donated little seedlings, and those are still in the blue tubes adjacent to these trees. These trees are really taken off. They're starting to get some character. They kind of have some funky twisted branches, and they're going to be, they are now quite beautiful, and as an entrance to our city, and quite a contrast from across the street when you first drive into Oak Harbor and you see these military planes. So I think it's a nice balance. Yes, we are a military community, but we're also named for the Gary Oak trees. And guess what? Here's some beautiful trees for you to look at when you drive past. So last year, our group legislated for the City Council to adopt honorary designation of Southeast 8th Street as the Avenue of the Oaks. So we got some grant money, and we designed and facilitated these signs. And then the City of Oak Harbor street guys got them erected, and they look just great. So now we can proudly say we have this street, which is heavily populated with Gary Oak trees, even still, as the Avenue of the Oaks. So here we are, we're up to 2021. And so again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are celebrating the Year of the Oak, the 170th anniversary of the naming of our town. I want to just point out the beautiful oak tree that's in the photo is an Oak Harbor tree. It's outside of the town, but still in Oak Harbor. It's off of Monroe Landing Road. And this is on the farm of Avis Rector. She was a school teacher in Oak Harbor, and she really loves the Gary Oak tree. So this is a wonderful tree, still standing and very healthy. So we chose that as sort of our poster child to celebrate the Year of the Oak. But so ask yourselves, how can I celebrate the Year of the Oak? What can I do? You can visit our website to get some fun ideas of something you can do even in the midst of the pandemic to celebrate. And lastly, this is the last slide, we're continuing to nurture future generations of Gary Oak trees. One of the things that our group does is we give a scholarship out to a worthy senior from Oak Harbor High School that's been involved in helping with Gary Oak trees. And we hope we can continue to do that in the future. And that wraps up my presentation. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself.
I have a question, Laura.
Yes.
And I want to thank you first for the information you have shared with us this morning. Those are really interesting and very informative points that you shared with us. So I have someone asked me before, how many Gary Oaks do we have in our city? And I couldn't answer that question because I don't know. So I said, I'll find out from the person Laura Renninger, who is the president of the Gary Oaks Society, to let me know how many Gary Oaks do we have in the city?
That's a good question, Daisy. We did an informal inventory a few years ago, and we think there's about 700 of them left.
Oh,
And again, that is an informal inventory because basically we just beat the streets. We just walked with a notepad and we didn't trespass on private property. But if they were big enough for us to see them, we marked them down. We are working on a better system for that. And we have a website up. It's still in its infancy. But if you go to www.soundoaks.org, you can see where we've started with actually GPS mapping the trees.
okay.
And so when you open that up, you can see green dots, orange dots, and red dots. And red dots signify trees that have died.
Okay.
Green dots are trees that are still living. And or already established trees. And then the orange dots are the new ones, the little babies that we planted in the last 5 years, 6 years.
Can you repeat the website again, please?
Yeah, soundoaks.org.
Soundoaks.org. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And again, just remember, you're not going to see every single one on there because it's just volunteers just putting in hours with the little GPS device and trying to get them all mapped. We believe we have the largest population of Gary Oaks in an urban setting in North Puget Sound. But the only way to really prove that is to finish the GPS work and compare it to other communities.
Okay. And I have one more thing to request from you. Will you be able to share all those information with Amy, our admin assistant, so that she could either email it to us or print it out and share all those information? I'd like to have them.
Like, didn't they do a recording of me? We're being recorded right now. So specifically,
I think she means your slides.
Okay.
Yeah, just your slides would be helpful.
So yeah, Daisy, you can go on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Or you can go on our website. I think it's embedded a different version, a longer version of me, because I try to kind of compress it for today's
okay.
meeting. But it's definitely already been recorded and posted. So either look on our website for it or look at YouTube. Yeah, just put in like the history of Gary Oaks and Oak Harbor or something like that, and it should come up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This one last question. Is the back years ago you requested a deferred mowing program for the Smith Park. Is that still in place?
So yes, we did get the deferred mowing policy approved by the board in 2019. And then the mowing was not done in 2020 from January to June.
Oh, okay.
And I think that part of that, people just thought, oh, it was the pandemic and, staff was kind of, part-time and all that. We did get some signs put up in Smith Park, one on one side and one on the other that explains the deferred mowing. Those signs are covered up right now by a piece of paper because of the posting for Safe Start pandemic rules of 6 feet apart and whatnot. I'd love to see those signs, those postings removed now that we're so far into the pandemic, so that people could understand why the mowing isn't going to take place. This year, there was just a miscommunication and it got mowed in March. But some things survived the mowing. I've been there recently. Looks like camas, the blue flowering camas bulb, which is so closely intertwined with Gary Oak ecosystems. The blades got cut off, the top of the blades, but the flower was spared. And so we will see a little bit of camas this year, but again, it's all about communication. And so next year, hopefully from January to June, it won't get mowed except for maybe a little mowing path for the little kids or tiny little dogs to kind of run around like we did last year around the merry-go-round and the slide. So yeah, that's still going to happen. It's just got a little different this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone? Well, I too would like to thank you for that presentation. It was very good and very educational. I would suggest one more slide, and that would be the picture of the Smith Park sign that's out of the wood from the post office oak.
Yes, we have that in another PowerPoint presentation. It's called All About the Gary Oak Tree. And there's significant space given to Smith Park, and it does include that beautiful sign. Yeah, thank you, good idea.
Well,
Okay, so remember, if you haven't got your PIN yet and you're a city employee or a parks or a board member with the city, ask for your PIN, wear your PIN proudly, and visit our website or go on our Facebook page and post yourself with your favorite Gary Oak tree and do what you can to promote this whole event.
Are the pins at City Hall, or where are they?
Yeah, they got dropped off, 275 of them or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're at the city. Check with Julie Lindsay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to sign off. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, then quickly moving on to the update on the Rotary Bridge. Is that,
Oh boy, where do we start on that one?
Well,
We
I can
ordered
start,
supplies.
Sally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a city effort underway to repair the bridge. It's a partnership with the Rotary, and Tally's in the process of purchasing materials. And we have a fabricator that has submitted shop drawings to the city for review for the new railing. I don't know how much information you've received to this point. Would you like me to share a few slides?
that would be helpful.
Okay. Yes, let me see here. Okay, so the bridge repairs that we are going to carry out on the Lagoon Bridge include removing the existing railing, replacing with steel cable railing that will match the railing throughout Windjammer Park. We're going to remove the decking and enhance that with an epoxy coating with an anti-skid surface. We're going to replace some of the rusted brackets under the bridge. And here's an image of the new railing, and it'll be in line with what is out there at Windjammer Park along the promenade and the ramp down to the People's Bank. There will also be some lighting provided after installation of the rail, some pedestrian level lighting on the bridge railing. Additionally, we'll be constructing these concrete pillars, 4 of them, one at each corner of the bridge, that will be a pedestal for the Rotary Club plaques. They're having 2 fabricated right now, and 2 have been salvaged from the site. Here's another view of the concrete pillars. So it'll have a little bit different profile of the bridge. If you have any questions, Tyler or I, anybody else in the city can answer them as well.
Well, I have one question with the lighting and stuff. I was unaware that there was going to be lighting, but I was wondering if the bridge would be, with the new rail system being, I'll call it smaller than the existing rails, if it would be wide enough for the sweeper to just cross over, not to sweep it, but just to cross over, so it doesn't have to go all the way around.
Well, the width between the rails will be approximately what it is now. We're going to have an additional handrail here that is not currently out there. So I would have to defer to Tally for if the sweeper can access through there.
The practice of moving the sweeper over that is not, we don't do that. We don't go across it right now. We'll be able to know a little bit more about the structure as we do our first section of demo. Part of this process is to check for rot inside of it, that they're concerned that there might be some pockets in there. So that's part of what we're digging for in there, is to make sure that it's all still sound, and anything that's bad can be cut out and replaced. And No, I'm not encouraging the guys to take the sweeper over it. I just don't want that could go
Well,
sideways with practice.
I understand not now, but I'm wondering if in the future, that would certainly facilitate getting the sweeper used more on those pathways. And that's the only, that and the fact that the surface will be redone. Are we taking all the planks out?
Yes. Yes, they will all come up so we can inspect the stringers.
But they won't be they won't be put back down and covered?
They will be put back down. We're going to take them up and bring them up to the shop, clean them so we're not cleaning over the waterway. And then we're going to put our coating on it up here so we're not coating over the waterway either. And then we'll bring them back down and reinstall them back onto the bridge. And while that's happening, we're hoping to have a guy or two down there doing some inspection and some filling of any holes or any issues we might have in there, some rot kill. If we got any rotten spots, we can kill it off. Or worst case scenario, if we find one that's rotten, we have priced out and made contact about purchasing a new stringer if we need it, or two.
One of the concerns that I had gotten from several folks in the park was those especially I got these comments from two different women that use the walking poles. You know, they're like ski poles that they one in each hand. They were commenting that they were getting stuck in the gaps and in the wood itself. So if you're refinishing them, that's what I was telling them, that we were going to have a new surface. But I didn't know myself that it was just going to be doing each plank individually, if you will. Are they going to be closer together so that, or a little bit closer together so there isn't quite the gap between them? When you
We're actually, sorry, Tom. We're actually going to do the opposite. We're going to space them apart so water doesn't sit on them. Because that's what the engineering firm that we're working with is concerned with, is that the water is not getting out of there, going through, and possibly making rotten situations. As far as the ski poles, I hope they're not sharp on the end and stabbing through everything we put down.
No, they're not that sharp. But the point is they're like canes, if you will. But they're up like a ski pole, and but they slip into the grooves now. So there isn't going to be I'll call it a solid piece that can go across it anywhere that people would be feeling secure to walk across.
That's kind of a design change. So if that's what we're going towards, we need to look into that here in the near future. I think we should be concerned about, if we do that though, it's going to hold water on top, and it could create slickness that way too.
Yeah, I it isn't an easy fix. I didn't know if you were using another material like they do in other areas where they've recovered a park. I mean a surface, and they put I'll call it a rough surface cloth that goes across. But if I don't know if it's porous or anything like that, but because I never looked that close. But I was just hoping for something that would address those folks' concern. Otherwise, they may not be able to use that bridge safely. And that, they use it every day. So I see them out there all the time. Are we going? I know that we're going to close this off. How long do you think this thing is going to take? This project?
We're expecting a bridge closure of about 2 to 3 months. I have a preliminary schedule I can share with you as well.
Okay.
So here's our preliminary schedule. We are just about at this date here. So we have the shop drawings. Tally is procuring his material. We have a bridge closure tentatively scheduled from April 18th through June 5th. So I'm sorry, not 2 to 3 months. I believe it was 6 to 8 weeks, and we're showing about 6 weeks right now. And that would, we'd have a detour around the lagoon during that time.
Something I should probably bring up about this too is that the regular scheduled maintenance that we enjoy is going to probably be hurt a little bit during this process. We're going to have to steal a lot of manpower to get this done. It's going to be a big, big job.
I know you guys will be able to handle everything though.
Thanks for your faith.
Yeah, when you do the lagoon wrap or detour, two things. One, I think that we need to sweep the lagoon walkway with the sweeper frequently because it gets covered with shells all the time. And I know that, again, going back to these walkers, there's several of them that won't use the lagoon area because there's something about walking on the broken shells that makes them feel unstable. And as you may know from seeing some folks out there in other places, some folks walk with a shuffle rather than a lifted foot. And so I think we need to make sure that that's swept frequently. The other piece is there is no access from the lagoon walkway up to the plaza area. Are we going to have a temporary thing put in or railing of some sort for those, again, for those people that are not comfortable walking on the grass?
You can, no, you're right. You can't go all the way around, can you?
Nope.
It's a short distance of,
That's supposed to come in phase 2, which is another thing we'll deal with. But yeah, that there is no access up without crossing grass. And it's kind of uphill. So can we put a temporary railing or something? You know, I don't want to jump the gun and put paving or anything, but something that we can rig up so that in case somebody is not comfortable walking on the grass.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That's something that we'll have to consider with the detour route.
I'm pretty certain we can come up with a plan to remedy that with a railing or some sort of, you know, we got stuff that we can put up temporary, or even if we have to put a couple posts in the ground, we can do something.
Yeah, it's only because there are people that don't like to walk on the grass because of stability. It's kind of uphill. And if it happens to be sprinkler in the morning or any time for that matter, and it's kind of wet, it makes it slicker for, again, those people that shuffle rather than just pick up their feet. So.
You're right, that section in there's only like 15, maybe 20 feet or so. If we do it in the right spot, it wouldn't be very far.
No. Yeah, unfortunately, where it's the narrowest is also the steepest.
Yeah.
So it may behoove us to do a little longer, wider area there. But yeah, I'm just looking out for our folks that someday I'll be shuffling too. So. Is there any questions from any of the board members about, or anybody else for that matter, about the bridge rehab?
Not for me.
Okay. Hearing none, we'll thank you for the update, and hopefully that surface can be figured out so that we can address those people's concern. And with the inner rail there, that they can still grasp, maybe that's what we'll emphasize, you know, whatever we need to do. Moving on to the unfinished business, we've got the naming resolution update. Who's doing that?
Was it a Jesse thing? Was it? Was he working on that?
I think it was a Jesse thing. It probably is still in administration working on that. On the resolution, I think it was brought up and related to Harbor Heights.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have anybody here that was a point on that project, but we can get back to you at the next agenda with some updates from administration.
Thanks, appreciate that. Then moving on to the Harbor Heights update. I mean, that's going to end up being the name at the rate that we go keep naming it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can give a quick update on Harbor Heights from a process standpoint. The city council looked at the two options on April 6th, and they chose to go with option 2, primarily with trying to pursue the gun club access road as being the option. I think at the workshop, we did talk about some challenges between the two access points. Gun Club Road being a county road will involve permits and access from the county, versus Elwha Road being accessed from the south. As we go forward in trying to implement concept 2 and looking at implementing phase 1, we'll have some more decisions to be made depending on the challenges we face with access points and so on. Hopefully everything will go smooth and we can go ahead. But option 2 has both of those 2 soccer fields as phase 1, one from Elwha and one from Gun Club Road. But the priority is to pursue the Gun Club Road option. So that was a concept that the city council voted on, and so that's kind of where that project will be kind of tending towards. From a process standpoint, the rezoning of the park before any implementation can happen, you need to zone the park with zoning designation. And that is going to be brought forward to the city council on April 20th. The hearing examiner held a hearing on it and is going to make a recommendation to the city council. And so that will be on the April 20th agenda. Also on the April 12th agenda, following the rezone, is the city council to designate it as a park. That's an important step because once it's designated as a park, then Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 6, I think, can be applied to it. And, the police need that designation in order to enact a lot of their clauses in the code. And so that will be an important step for the city council to do. And that's on the April 20th agenda as well. So that's the 2 updates from a process standpoint. After the city council decision on April 6th, we're pursuing that phase 1 with the engineers, with our consultants to start designing that phase of the project. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer as best as I can.
Any questions from anyone? Stacy, you don't want to ask about bathrooms?
I think they answered my question last special meeting we had about providing at least a portable potty for the soccer players that would be using those phase 2 soccer fields that we recommended to the city council to approve. Because as far as I understand, the bathrooms won't be constructed yet, the permanent bathrooms. So my concern is to have ample parking and portable potty for the players and their parents.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we heard from all the meetings and the workshops in terms of having the appropriate facilities when you open the park. We hear that as we go into the design, more and more details of the park and the plan will come forward. We have been dealing with the concept stage and the overall design of the park in terms of access and layout. We'll start to get into the details, and there'll be a lot of things that will come up in terms of requirements and site development, county requirements, and so on. So we have a lot more challenges. It's not a lay down and build kind of a setup. So as part of that, the parking, we heard from City Council, we know that these fields will be used a lot, and that 50 parking spaces for which we have the grant covers only the 50 parking spaces, but we know that there'll be more demand than that. So we'll have to look at all of that in the design phases. We still have, as a city, to meet our own requirements in terms of how we provide all of these facilities for the public. So it'll be a balance point in terms of how much we can get built with the funding that we have, what are the requirements, and so on. But the restrooms, the extra parking, they're all important things that even staff are noting as important features to have in the park. Once we get into the design, permitting, requirement stage, there's a lot more details that will come up, and we'll keep you updated on that process.
I trust that those suggestions that we advocated for in our meeting on the 17th, all of them, including the snack area that for the soccer fields, rather than having to go up to the one by the ball, the baseball fields. And also for me, it's the dog run area so that they stay off the fields with the dogs. So
I think when Sabrina presented the item to the City Council, she captured all the points. I think there were 3 or 4 points that the Park Board had listed in that special meeting. Has all been conveyed to the City Council.
okay, thank you, appreciate it. That brings us to the end of that. I would like one more aspect. If whoever's setting up the agenda for next month, I'd like them to include the progress of the dog park expansion that we had approved funding for, and where we are on that, and what's happening with the existing dog park that we have. And then also if we can have phase 2 to address Hal's comment about, it seems to be getting put to the sideline with all our focus on Harbor Heights. If we can just get an update as to where we are on phase 2. There was supposed to be, prior to COVID, there was supposed to be some public meetings on, input from the community on, design factors for the lagoon and all that phase 2 pieces. That, to my knowledge, never happened. And so if we can get an update from somebody on phase 2 for Windjammer and the dog parks, I'd appreciate it. Does any other board member have anything they'd like to see on next month's agenda? Hearing none.
Do we have
Go ahead.
Tom?
Yeah.
I would like to know if they're looking for an alternate for our park board members.
Yeah, I agree that it would be nice to, and if somebody could get in touch with Casey and see where she is at in terms of her ability to continue with the parks, and she's missed so many meetings. I know that on other boards that I'm on, that if you miss a certain number of meetings, they kind of bounce you off.
Right.
But Casey, of course, has had health issues and stuff, and I just want to make sure that if she sees that she's maybe still able to attend, that, you know, if we can find that out, because then we might have two positions. But yeah, that's been I hope put on the web, right, on the Oak Harbor thing, that there's an opening. Anyone?
Are you still there, Lisa? I think Lisa Felix was working on that a little bit. We were talking about that earlier this or end of last week. So yeah, we recognize there's an issue there, and we were working to remedy. It would be great to hear from her, so we know exactly where that position is going.
Yeah, thank you, Tally. We are working on recruitment for all of our boards and commissions. We do have 2 applications for Park Board at the minute, which I have presented to Mayor. And so that will be helpful to know for Casey's position, if you have 2 openings or not.
Lisa, are you able to get in touch with her and you know, find out if she feels she's able to do that?
We can absolutely send her an email, yeah, on behalf of the Park Board. If you would like us to, we can do that.
Yeah, that would be helpful, just to see where she thinks she's at. Speaking of positions, where are we on, can we also talk next month about where we are on Jesse's replacement and interview? I see a hand up. Is that somebody wishing to speak?
It would just be a vote.
Well,
Vote for Tally.
Oh,
Yeah, Kelly, I don't know if we're even applying, but, you know, obviously that's your business, but it'd be nice to know.
Yeah, we are, I'll just give you a quick update with little information that I know. I think we've already advertised for the position. We have had applications in, and we are, the last I talked to HR, we're going through and reviewing the applications. I think this week we'll probably narrow down some candidates for the position. And I know they're working really hard and trying to line up some interviews soon after. So we'll go through the rest of April, probably going through the process of looking at candidates and doing some interviews in the next 2 weeks.
Great. Well, thanks for that input. Is there anything else anyone would like to address before we close out here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see a hand.
you want to go, or want me to go, Tally, or?
Rock, paper, scissors. I want to see a battle for it.
Here, I'll do a quick share screen here. And can everybody see that all right? That map?
Yeah.
So I have Therese Kingsbury here from Arts Commission. I know some of you know her, and something has recently come up for the Prowler Memorial. So this is a granite memorial, and where we're proposing to put it is right across from PBY, next to the PBY, the plane itself. Here's the pathway leading to the park. Here's where we're proposing to put it, kind of in the 4 corners of this spot here. Here it is, kind of digitized. But yeah, we would just like to get or seek approval from the park board, since it is Windjammer property. We still need to get approval from Arts Commission, but we weren't able to get quorum last week, and we have an Arts Commission meeting this week, I believe. Yeah.
And this is different than the memorial that we have already going in, right?
No, this is the one that was going in up on the structure that's supposed to be scheduled to be rebuilt, which is a long process, and it's been sitting in our yard for 7 years. So it needs to go up, and we have other art pieces and stuff we can come up with when that other project comes forward that we could potentially put up there on the lookout. But for right now, this seems like a pretty important piece. There's some people labeled on there that were our community, you know, so it would be nice to see it out for public.
Well, the question I have is the person who funded and put this forward has been waiting for the site that we have already begun fixing for all these years. And the question is where is that person on this site change possibility?
Go ahead, Therese.
I'm looking at Phelps' phone number right now, and I've been doing quite a bit of homework, and I didn't want to call and speak about the process and saying that somebody's picking up the ball and we're going to run with it. I'm going to do it probably 10 minutes after we close this meeting. But this location is 1,000% better than down at the end of a walkway that nobody ever goes down. I mean, down at the end near the marina in an unsung area that's actually, there are a lot of detriments to that area, and Callie can speak to that, but this has a place to sit and think and reflect and appreciate, and it actually creates a triangle of memorial with the plane and the museum. So it just, it's begging for this sculpture to be installed, and it could be done in a day. It's ready to go. And to be laying for 7 years, and the whole community got together and raised money to create it. It needs to happen. It needs to be a priority, I think.
Well, I didn't understand that it was the whole community. I understood it was an individual that put
The community of Harrington, the community of Harrington was spurned by the family member. And they raised the funds to honor the 3 pilots. So, and I'm going to get more of the story when I call Phelps, but I didn't want to open a dialogue until I knew that we were actually going to do something.
I have talked to him in person, and it's a tearjerker. It's a rough one, and he is very open to this spot here. He just wants to see it installed right now at this point. And there's the benefit to installing it in a place like this is it will get installed once and we'll be done with it. We won't have to try to move it because it'd be hard to move if we installed it down on the lookout right now and the project goes through, then we'd have to try to move it. It could get damaged in moving it and that sort of thing. So, and at bare minimum, the lookout's probably another year out. I mean, the way it's sitting right now.
Okay, well, I thought we were further along on that site. I just want to make sure that because he has waited so long and has been so cooperative with us on getting this site that we have designated already, and then all the structure pieces. This thing is not lightweight. So is there any concern about preparing this new site to be able to handle that weight and structure?
I can double verify that, but from what I'm getting is the concrete PSI meets the standard. Basically, we'd have to drill 2 holes in the concrete spot there we choose, epoxy it down, and start erecting it all the way up. It wouldn't be like you have anything hollow underneath of it. It's solid underneath of it.
Was it not going to have a pedestal?
It has a pedestal. There's 3 actual pieces. There's a base plate, a pedestal, and then the actual tower itself. And the tower is 6.5 feet by itself. The pedestal is about 1.5 feet. The base plate's probably 4 to 6 inches.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I've seen it in pieces, as some of our board members certainly have seen it that way, in there behind the offices there. But I guess my biggest concern is that because this person has waited so long with designating this site and the site that we've already got. I just want to make sure that he's on board and that there is not going to be, I mean, he just wants it up, but I just don't want it to be kind of a moment of time that he misses because he wants it up. I have no problem with the site. Board members, I'd like to hear from you, Daisy.
It's already been 7 years. 3 weeks isn't going, I think it needs to be put on the agenda. I move to put this on the April agenda and then move forward with it. I'm not, we're starting a precedent by doing things that are not on the agenda. And I'm not comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So I would have to vote no on this project if you decide that's how you're gonna handle it. So I move that we put this on the April agenda and take care of it.
You're wanting to do it today?
No, I'm moving to put this item on the April Park Board agenda so we can vote on it.
Rosemary, do you mean the May Park Board? This is the April Park Board.
Yeah, on May.
Right, Rosemary, that's what you wanted? For next month?
The next one.
Okay. Okay. We have a motion on the floor that we have this site discussed and perhaps approved on the May agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Rosemary, I assume.
And
Judy? You-
Aye.
Okay. Then we'll put it on the agenda, but I think it would be real helpful if by that time communication has been made to this gentleman so that we hear from him in terms of, is this acceptable for sure? Is he okay with it? He can still go with the site that we have been working on if that's what he would rather do. But we're open to his input on this, given that it has been so many years and his patience has been great. And I would like to also see a finish to this. So with that, we'll put it on that agenda, and if the staff or whoever can make contact and get it back to us.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for your time and listening.
So on that, any other comments? I'll entertain a adjournment motion.
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion to adjourn. It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being patient and listening to me talk.
Thank you, Tom.